Hey everybody, David Heavener here. Welcome. I have an amazing, and when I say amazing, I mean amazing with a capital A, an amazing guest today with me, and he's on the line. His name is Paul Peterson. Paul, are you there?
I am here, David. A pleasure to be here.
Well, I'm so glad to have you, and I'm very honored. And Paul, we've got some what I call some of our oldie goldies out there, but we also have a young crowd out there. And I'm going to I'm sure a lot of people know who you are, but I'm going to introduce you as if they didn't know who you were, and therefore everybody's going to know who you are. Ladies and gentlemen, Paul Peterson was the son of Donna Reed on the Donna Reed Show. So, Paul, I'm so glad to have you. Hey, we're in Los Angeles. So tell me my first question is, how in the world did you land the role, and how old were you when you did the Donna Reed Show?
Well, on the Donna Reed Show, I was there from age 12 to 20. And I came by that wonderful part because of the work I had done the previous year in the movie called Houseboat with Cary Grant and Sophia Loren. And I came with some pretty good recommendations. And Shelley Fabre and I had already, the year before, kind of worked out our brother and sister act on a failed pilot for the Sherry Lewis Show. So when the show began, we naturally fell into the role of, squabbling brother and sister. And, of course, had wonderful parents in Donna Reed and Carl Betts playing Dr. Alexander Stone.
So you were already an actor, and you were climbing up the ladder, and then that's when you landed the Donna Reed Show.
Well, that's correct. I actually had started in 1955 when I was 9 on a classic show called The Mouseketeers. I was on the Mickey Mouse Club very briefly back in 1955. That was my first professional job.
Oh no, you were a Mouseketeer. I didn't know that.
A lot of people don't.
That is amazing. So kiddos, if you're listening out there and you're under the age of, I don't know what, Paul, maybe 35 or 40, the Mouseketeers was a club that when you're a kid, you have to be part of this Mouseketeer club with the little ears on your head, right, Paul?
Well, that's correct. And what's interesting is over the decades, there have been several versions of the Mickey Mouse Club. And they always seem to find an audience. They find some really talented, energetic, and attractive kids. And for a while, the show prospers.
Yeah. Amazing. And that came from Walt Disney, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. And we're going to talk.
I had the honor, David, you'll find this interesting. After the Donna Reed Show ended, the very first movie role I got after the Donna Reed Show, now this is 1966, was a movie, Walt Disney's last movie called Happiest Millionaire. Eddie Hodges and I played brothers. And it was a fun movie, and I was honored to be there.
Wow. We're going to talk about Disney, but I want to go to the Donna Reed Show. I've watched, since I knew I was going to interview you, and of course I had seen the Donna Reed Show before, but I really started watching episodes with a closer eye. It was a very, very family-oriented show. It had on a scale of morals, 10 being the best and 1 being the worst, I would give it a 9. A 9 plus, okay, maybe 10, depending on obviously the episode. Now Donna was a strong woman figure in the family, nothing wrong with that. But what I loved about the Donna Reed Show is it was a family that was semi-functional. It wasn't a totally just dysfunctional family. It was a man and a woman who sometimes had problems as parents, but they worked through it. They loved each other. They had 2 kids, and sure, the kids fought, but it was all, everything, you knew that you had each other's back. You knew that you were a family unit. And,
it was quite clear that we all cared for each other. That's what came through. Look, the people who were involved in the Donna Reed Show were professionals. the man who created the show was named William Roberts. He did a little movie called Magnificent Seven.
Oh.
When people were aware of their responsibilities of coming into folks' living room every Thursday night for 8 years.
Wow. So, Paul, Donna Reed's show and so many, not so many, but quite a few of shows during that time period, it upheld family moral values. What happened? I mean, look at where we are today in Hollywood.
What happened? The 60s happened. Let's remember that in the mid-60s, we had 500,000 troops in Vietnam. It was Timothy Leary, tune in, turn on, and drop out. We had the British invasion, which I think kind of really hurt the music industry, or at least as we knew it back then. And as I tell people in the speeches, back in that day, you could understand the words to popular music, and sex wouldn't kill you.
So I wrote down a few things that you mentioned. I want to go back to those, but as we look at the programming now in Hollywood, and you see it, I'm sure you're very aware of it. What say you on some of these shows? How do you view these, and what's your opinion?
Well, my opinion, generally, given the current offerings on commercial broadcast, is the terrible exploitation and misuse of children. They are always now ill-mannered and smart-mouthed, and they always seem to solve the problems while Dad, especially Dad, is at loose ends all the time. And I resent it. I really do. That's not the American family, at least as I've experienced it. The nuclear family is still critically important to the well-being and nurturing of children. And frankly, the television executives have forgotten that role.
Wait a minute. You said something that to me in my world is earth-shattering. Okay, now, if you've seen any of my shows and my videos, you'll see I stand on family moral values, okay? Mm-hmm. What Hollywood has done to the family, but what you said is something I've never really, quite frankly, thought of before, is exploitation of children. When most of us think of children being exploited, we think of, sexual exploiting and just even financially. But what you're saying is with Hollywood has taken children, and because children are children, they sometimes don't know any better, they aren't well developed, and they put them in roles, and they said, here, honey, or here, dude, you say this. It's okay to say that, do that. And they kind of coax them on. Instead of giving them good moral guidelines, they're actually giving them trashy dialogue and trashy stories. Is that kind of what I'm getting?
Yeah, I agree with you. It's not just that. It's also the disposable nature of the children they do utilize. I mean, look at the string of Disney so-called family shows. The girls are always size 0. They always are dressed in these finest fashions. They are surrounded by adults who have an agenda. Right. And the children are helpless with this. I mean, just look at the Disney kids, from Lindsay Lohan to Miley Cyrus. Right. You got to ask, why do they do this? Because these are purposeful acts. People mean to do this.
Wow. So, Paul, I'm not saying you're saying this, but could this be a possibility that the fact that Lindsay Lohan, that Miley Cyrus, that the fact that they ended up the way they are, if whatever that R is, could have been because of the system that they went through with Disney, the channel?
Almost certainly. And then it takes a great strength of character to overcome this. Look at Britney Spears. What a comeback. I mean, that girl was completely lost.
You're right.
And now she is back together again.
You're right. This is product of the Hollywood system. I'm talking about the modern day Hollywood system, which is corrupt, basically, because they exploit children. We don't take care of our children. And
that's exactly right. And it's not just doing the project, because the project will have an impact on your life.
Right.
It's the aftercare. What comes after the ball game is over?
Right, right. And I want to talk about that. Before I do, I want to mention one more thing, because then we're going to talk about your mission in life and what you've been doing. But you also touched on something that was important. It's not just the project, it's not just the movie or the TV series they're making, is what's behind the camera when all this is happening. What's the
Exactly so.
Yeah. What's the agenda?
I always ask people, David, to consider the difference between having Donna Reed as your television mom and having Roseanne Barr.
Oh, how can you say it both in the same sentence, Paul?
Yeah, well, it's hard for me, but I try to make the point.
And
There was a certain understanding within the fabric of family television, the so-called the family hours, that you had a responsibility to your audience. Not only the adults who were permitting the television viewing, but to the children who were going to be impacted by the images and emotions that were portrayed.
That's right. And just from watching the Donna Reed show, it seemed like she was the type person, correct me if I'm wrong, she was a strong woman, in the show, but she seemed like the type person that would be nurturing after they yelled cut. In other words, was she nurturing to you as a young person on the set, and to all the young people?
Oh, absolutely. I called her mom most all the time. Donna Reed was the oldest of 5 children from a Depression-era family in Iowa, rural Iowa. And even though she was a trained and celebrated actress through the MGM system, from It's a Wonderful Life to other just signature roles, she never forgot where she came from. And to her, the growth and development of Shelley Fabre and me personally as her TV son was far more important than the work. Because the work, David, these are professionals, including myself. The work was simple. It was coping with all the other forces that were more important to Donna.
Right. I could see. You're also, isn't your mother from Iowa? Like, didn't you mention that your real mother, or you're from Iowa, or your family's from Iowa?
Yes, my family was from the adjacent county. We were at Cherokee County, and Donna was Crawford County.
Wow.
In fact, Crawford County is where the Donna Reed Foundation is headquartered, in Denison, Iowa.
Wow.
But it's important to remember that Donna Reed, next to Lucille Ball, was one of the most successful women in television history. She owned her show.
Yeah. And I look at her, and then I look at someone like Mary Tyler Moore, and I respect Mary Tyler Moore, but for some reason, I just saw Donna as the type of, like, if I wanted a mother, I'd say, I'd like to have Donna Reed for a mother.
Now, I happen to agree with you, but never forget, and I've written about this, Donna Reed was a Hollywood star.
Yes.
She was the real deal, with an Academy Award, by the way, on her mantle at home.
Oh yeah. No, she was the real deal. She wasn't someone that that came up through the ranks of television, never could make it onto the big screen, because back then there was a big difference. If you were a Hollywood movie star on the screen, you never would do TV, or if you were a TV person, you could never make it on the big screen.
Let alone do commercials.
Oh yeah, no, she was the. So let's get back to today, or let's move forward. So you look at a company, and I'm going to call it out, Paul. I didn't for a long time, but now I am. You look at Disney, all right? You look at the show Andy Mack, okay? And are you familiar with that show?
No, not really.
Okay, well, that show really irritates me. Andy Mack is the daughter of, or actually, she's 11. She's 11 or 12, and the other person who's the star of the TV series is probably around 30 something, and you think it's Andy's sister who's raising her, but come to find out it's really Andy's mother. Okay, she discovers, right? Now, the young kids on there, the boys look like girls, and Andy looks like a boy, and they have young girls that are very, to me, sexual. They wear the sexual clothing that really I don't think 11-year-olds should be wearing. It's just not my thing. So looking at
I agree with that. I see that everywhere, whether it's in the popular press,
yeah,
or on TV. And what kills me as a person who runs a foundation to protect children in the business, the negative images and influences are so apparent. And I've said it before, I'm sure Walt Disney is turning in his grave.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So I want to go back to the shows, but you had mentioned your organization, so, and I want to go ahead
Yeah.
and play that out. So it's called A Minor Consideration.
That is correct.
Would you please tell me what minor consideration does?
Well, David, I was writing a book back in 1990, would have been my 14th book, called A Minor Consideration. But suddenly the real-life dramas being played out by former kid stars became so important that I put the book away and started trying to help. There were several suicides in a row. We had people like Danny Bonaducci was in trouble. Her was writing about her addiction problems at age 9. Dana Plato was about to lose her life. I mean, there were just so many kids that I grew up with in Hollywood who were in trouble that I had to help. And what started as a mission, a very private mission between my wife and myself, trying to reach out and help people, became larger and more important and involved more and more people. And it went from, helping a half a dozen people to helping a half 100 to all of a sudden we were there within the theatrical unions on the Young Performers Committee because, look, the deck is stacked against working children. And there's 5.5 million working children in the United States. And most of them, like show business kids, are exempt, David, from federal child labor law.
Really?
I absolutely have been since 1938.
Say that again, Paul, because I want everybody to hear what you just said. I want to hear what you just said.
Okay. Since 1938 and the passage of the Fair Labor Standards Act, the children in the entertainment business are exempt from federal child labor law. So are the kids working in agriculture. The actual exemption is called the newsy exemption, which meant to protect the kids delivering newspapers all around the country, hundreds of thousands of them. This federal exemption has not yet been corrected, and we're working hard to fix that. Children, David, understand, are the property of their parents. They are no different than a car or a house or a cow. And what that means, if you work in a state that doesn't have strong child labor laws, you are at risk.
Yeah, yeah. And you just mentioned something, and I get on this bandwagon. You see, the problem is the parents drop the ball, okay? It's about the family unit. Now, I understand there's there's some women out there, and even guys that are single parents, and God, my prayers to you, and this is not in any way aimed as an arrow toward you. But even if you're a single parent, I know it's hard, there's always support. There's always support out there. And we just have to, as parents, it's like Paul said, we are in charge of our children to a certain age, a certain age of accountability. And parents...
The quickest help that a sports parent or a stage parent can get is to go ask the people who have done this. Don't listen to managers and agents and producers. Go talk to the kids who actually lived this process. And
right.
This is true in sports, and it's true in show business.
Yeah. And Paul, I've made a lot of movies. I've made over 40 films with people like Tony Curtis and Martin Landau, and just some great actors. And I noticed through the years, as I would make movies, and I had children in my films, there'd be two types of children. There'd be the children that were unruly, and there'd be the children that kind of just would sit still. Now, I'm talking in recent times. I'm not talking 40 years ago. And I would always ask, what is the difference? Why are these children like this, and why are these children like this? Now, I'm kind of generalizing, so don't hold me against the wall on this. But 9 times out of 10, Paul, it was children that would actually hit their mark when they're supposed to, and they knew their lines, were children that had their parents with them. They were even like homeschooled. It's like, and I'm not.
The shortcut is this: a good set of parents will protect you whether you are living in a ghetto in India.
Yeah.
Or in Beverly Hills. A good set of parents will protect you from the worst that life wants to throw at you.
Absolutely. I do not buy for a second that kids in ghettos or in bad parts of town are less likely because of the economic level. It's all about the parents. It's all about the parents.
Yes, indeed.
Doesn't matter where you live. Like I said, in India or Beverly Hills or Compton or wherever. But I noticed on my set, I would say, well, why are the parents with the kids? And they were usually homeschooled. And they did it for spiritual reasons, and also reasons they could, be on movie sets a lot more. But the kids that were in public school, they just seemed a little more anxious. They seemed a little more unruly. And I think a lot of that has to do today with the way our school system is,
Well, that's part of it. But another part of it is the amount of training that children are exposed to. Look, in my era, and this is going back to, Shirley Temple days, you had to sing and act and be able to dance if you needed to. You had to be able to do all those things, and you took endless lessons to make sure you were up to snuff.
Right.
Nowadays, they just throw kids out there in front of the camera.
Right.
That's the reality show nonsense.
It is, because they have a certain look. I mean, back then, you had a great look, and Shelley had a great look. Everybody had a great look. But, you also had to get out and, like you said, sing and dance, and you had to have talent, right? Not just a great look.
That is correct.
Yeah.
And it was a very strenuous audition process. Nowadays, it seems like they're just scooping kids up off the street, and you see it everywhere, whether it's John and Kate +8 or Honey Boo Boo.
Yeah. Well, kids are disposable now. It's like you said, and what you said was earth-shattering to me. I've got that. I got to use that. I'm sorry. But the exploitation of children is not just about what we think it is. It's about Hollywood taking and using these kids by giving them dialogue that is detrimental to their minds, okay, and making them say things.
Yeah.
And I saw a thing on, I think it was Andy Mack. Paul, I'm going to tell you this. I don't know if it's going to shock you or not, but I had to listen. I even asked my wife. I said, "Did I just hear what I heard?" And she goes, "Well, I think you did." Two kids are talking to each other. Okay, I think it was a young 10-year-old boy and Andy, who's 11 or 12. And she said, Andy says to the guy, or vice versa, says, "Well, they called me a diskhead." And Andy says, "What?" And I think the guy says, "Call me a diskhead." And she says, "Can you say that again?" Diskhead. So, Paul, you know where I'm going with this, right?
Of course I do.
Okay. So here's the thing. That in itself, is that terrible? Is that going to send you to hell? Is that going to? But no. But what's that doing? That's 1 inch closer to having young kids start thinking about sexuality and about the male anatomy. You know what I'm talking about.
Of course I do, and I see it happening everywhere, and including in our school systems. There is much that we have to unwind, if you will. I always thought it was amazing that my very ambitious and beautiful and talented female friends were busy pursuing careers, and I would ask them, "Who's going to raise the children? If you're off doing all of this, what happened to the traditional role of someone, hopefully a mom, being in the family to raise you?" And
Yeah.
that has gotten lost, and it's worse in the school systems than it's ever been.
So your relationship with your father, it was a relationship that, it wasn't perfect. There's nothing in life that's perfect, but hey, if you fell and you messed up, there was always restoration. You could always come back to your dad, or your dad come to you, and you all had a relationship, right?
That is correct. And the same, of course, with Donna Reed playing Donna Stone. You know, there were 22 and a half minutes to pass along emotional instructions and a good and positive ending to any story we broadcast, whether it was the adoption of triplets or an interracial marriage or something as simple as finding a lottery ticket that wasn't mine. We came out with the right conclusion, and people went away with a smile on their face.
Wow. You know, Paul, between what you do and what I'm doing, and I believe God has led us to do this, is to bring morals back into Hollywood. And I really believe it can happen, don't you? I mean, if enough people get...
I do. That's what, my daily work is trying to find a way to restore that goodness, the goodness that exists in people. And unfortunately, Hollywood no longer believes that. Hollywood is out for itself, and they are causing great harm.
Yeah, and I tell people that there's the Hollywood system, and then there is God's system. And I think I know God's system is a moral system. God created the family. God wants to hold the family up, and I pray for anybody that wants to tear the family down. And with guys like Paul Peterson, with his A Minor Consideration, which is an organization that is out to not only help restore the family, but really to go out to these child stars and to come to their aid. You know, there's so many child stars that have been emotionally damaged, right, Paul, because of the industry?
Well, of course, sometimes you play a part that is harmful. It's literally harmful to your character. I'm thinking of Patty McCormick playing the evil girl in The Bad Seed. That has lifelong consequences, and unless you are carefully counseled and supported by the adults around you, you can be at great risk. I'm thinking of Dakota Fanning, this wonderful young actress who was suddenly put in a movie called Hound Dog, in which she was raped on camera and in bed with an adult man. Now, who does things like that?
See, I tell people, they don't understand. In a child's mind, it's not acting. When your mind is not developed and you're actually doing something and going through it, an adult can possibly process it as this is acting. They can separate it. Paul, a child can't do that, can they?
No, they can't. And that, of course, is the problem. This is not about professional acting. Remember, your task as an actor is to speak other people's words and lie about your feelings. So even if you're terribly conflicted in a difficult emotional scene, you've got to have somebody there to help you decompress. Because at the end of the day, the image you create lasts forever. I'm so fortunate that nearly all of the work I have ever done on screen has a positive impact, and it's nothing to be ashamed of.
Mm-hmm. My final question to you is, before I ask you this question, I want you to give your website out so the audience can know where to go.
Yeah, so you can find our work at aminorconsideration.org. It's A Minor Consideration, all one word, .org, O-R-G. We are a 501c3. And if you're looking for Paul Peterson, it's easy to find me anywhere on Facebook or, for that matter, the phone directory. Just spell Peterson, Petersen. You'll find me.
There you go, folks. You never have a star say, hey, I'm in the directory, go find me, Except, yeah.
But it's true. Look, I can't be out of touch.
No,
I'm here to help people, and they need to be able to reach me if there's trouble.
Well, that's what I tell my audience. You know, when this is why I'm making The Last Evangelist. It's a TV series that tells the truth about God, about the condition of our world, about morals, about, you know, just a lot of things. And I tell people, look, my number's out there. Call me. You know, I'll pray for you. You can pray for me.
Yeah.
We'll hold each other up. We'll stand. We got to stand together on this thing. We can't be divided. You know. So
I quite agree, and let me tell you, David, it can't happen soon enough.
It can't happen soon enough. But I feel like God. I know God has called me into Hollywood to help support people like yourself. You know, we've got, and I've met some other people, Paul, including you, that are the backbone of what this new movement is coming to be. And my last question is, it's a hard question. How much of this agenda, I'm going to call it an agenda to destroy children in Hollywood, how much of this agenda do you think comes from a personal point of view, meaning a perverted point of view? Do you think there's perverts in Hollywood that are doing this?
Without question. And they are driven by a harmful, anti-human political agenda. The truth is they don't care about anyone but themselves. And what's so sad about this is these folks, in by and large, are also raising their own children. Imagine the harm that's going to come there.
Oh, my goodness.
It's awful.
Oh, my God.
David, it's been such a pleasure to talk with you today. It truly has been.
Paul, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Listen, I'd like to have you on again because there's some things that we didn't touch on. I feel like the audience needs to know about that you have information you can give. So thank you so much. God bless you and keep up the good work.
And God bless you, David. I look forward to our next conversation.
Bye-bye.